Wondering what the F has happened to your body and your life? You're in the right place, my friend. Welcome to Season 3 of Transforming 45, where we dive into the incredible stories of how brilliant humans are navigating the midlife squeeze with courage, passion, and a healthy dose of humor. Don't miss out on any of our heart-led episodes. Hit the subscribe button, leave a 5-star review, and if you're inspired, share an episode you love with a friend. It means more to me than I can express that you're choosing to spend time here and sharing our message of Midlife Revolution. So let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. This week, I'm really thrilled to welcome Sue Erhart to the show. She is the author of Lose Your Critic for Good, a step-by-step process for reclaiming your spirit. As a retired corporate executive leader and at a large company and a lawyer by training, Sue is also the creator of Practical Spirituality, a platform where she helps people navigate their personal spiritual journeys to find not only fulfillment, but great success too. Drawing from her experiences, Sue shows her followers an easier path after doing it the hard way. Sue, we are going to have so much to talk about. I am so glad that you are here because this time, as you and I both know, and many of the listeners, midlife is a time where it can be a hard path and that inner critic can be really loud. So I'm so glad that you are here today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm delighted to be here.
All right. So we are going to start at the beginning. So Sue, who are you and how did life introduce you to this version?
Love the question, Lisa. So I am a midlifer who is following her passion. Just a few years ago, I was in my corporate job leading at a large organization. As you said, I'm a lawyer by background and had a good job, felt that I was contributing well, but just didn't feel that spark, that desire, that joy. There was clearly something missing. I kept looking at my life and saying, my life is good. I had good relationships, a good job, steady income. I mean, good. But I was really just hungry for great. So I did something which felt very unusual for me. And I just really dove into anything that piqued my interest, which at the time was a lot of spiritual topics and a lot of very practical spiritual topics. And I just let myself play and have fun with it. And I also let myself start writing, which is something I really, really enjoy, but I really didn't see an outlet for it. So I just started writing and I started this whole platform called Practical Spirituality, asked friends if they would sign up for my newsletter. And fast forward to today, I've got subscribers all over the world to my newsletter. I send out a weekly newsletter every Sunday morning on practical spirituality. My first book was published in January, Lose Your Critic for Good. And I now have this thriving platform where I'm sharing all my writing and just having a blast doing it. So I'm now retired from the corporate and doing this full time. And this version of myself is definitely my most joyful self, my most excited, and I'll say my most forward facing self, because I think for a long time, I was someone who kept looking into the past. And so this version of me faces forward.
That is really interesting, that idea of forward facing. I also sometimes wonder if that definition of forward facing, because when you first said it, I was like, oh, you're actually showing the entirety of yourself instead of the segments of ourselves that we tend to let be seen. Do you feel any of that in that idea of forward facing as well?
That is, I would say, encapsulated in it. I do think forward facing means you're showing up as a whole, integrated human, all of your aspects, all of your parts loved up with you. That's the reason you no longer have to go to the past. You've collected all your pieces and all your aspects, and now you're moving forward.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to pull it all together. So there's two things that I really want to dive in from that first part of the conversation. And the first one is around how we find ourselves in this midlife transition in the workplace. Because we know, so Canada and the US, the data in the US is very similar, that 1 in 10 women are leaving the workforce due to unsupported menopause and perimenopause symptoms. So there's that element of it, and it played a role in my story, but I didn't know it at the time. And it's not the only part of the story, right? Because even had I known that a lot of what I was experiencing was because of perimenopause, I still would have made the decision that I made because the work, so I was an educator for 20 years. That space it had never allowed me to be my full self. And at this point in time, I had enough of myself together to know I don't want to stay in a place where I can't be my full self. So I think there's those two elements that are at play for a lot of us who are going through this midlife transition. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are around that.
I wholly agree. I think midlife transitions to me are about recapturing your authentic self. It's about getting back to that core, to that inner you, the you that's eternal. So I see these midlife, whatever they might be. I don't want to use the word crises because I don't see them as crises, but let's just call midlife shifts that start to happen. I think all of them are about getting reconnection to your authentic self, which can be difficult if you're in an environment where you feel forced to conform, to show up a certain way, to present a certain way, to think a certain way, to agree to what's going on. I'm not going to say it's impossible. I will tell you, like, I felt particularly at the last years of my career that I was showing up very authentically, but I had also done years and years of inner work, so that I felt confident when I said something that everyone disagreed with, or I showed up just how I was, how I felt, and let my emotions be what they were going to be instead of suppression. So I think it can be done, but I think it is challenging. And that's why so many smartly say, I'm going to take a path where I no longer have to keep putting on all these personas, and then I can more quickly get to know my authentic self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And there's this in conversation I've had with lots of women, they feel like, well, I am showing up as my authentic self, and it's just so uncomfortable. Right. When I actually stand in my power and I feel like I am doing what I know is right, and the institution, so in my example and in yours, the institution that I was working inside of made that level of authenticity very uncomfortable. And that can be the really challenging sort of like intersection for decision making, because you know that you are really skilled at the work that you do. It's that, lots of people said to me, Lisa, but you're really good at what you do. I was like, yeah, yes, thank you. Thank you for seeing that. And it's not just about that. It's not just about being good at what I do. It's also about being good to myself.
For sure. I mean, to me, that's the foundation of inner success, which is a topic that I write about a lot. You really can't get anywhere with your goals until you build up that inner success platform. But I will just chime in and say, so I think that life delivers each of us the experiences we need to grow and to get where we need to go. And absolutely, I have felt and have been in situations, particularly earlier in my career, where when I showed up as my authentic self, I felt that tension, but I also saw that as an opportunity for me too, to really shore up my inner belief that I really no longer care what other people think of me. So it was an opportunity too, even though you're right, there was some discomfort with it.
Yeah, I was presenting at a workshop this weekend, and the session that I do is called Finding the Magic in Menopause. And someone came up to me and was like, Lisa, you're going to have to really work hard to convince me that there is magic in menopause. But it's what you were just saying, that it's a gift, right? These challenges that we experience, and I don't want to disregard the challenge and the hard that exists in them, but they absolutely are gifts that release us from all of the expectations and the weight of other people's thoughts about who we should be. And that is what the magic is in this transition.
I would say as well, and I see this in so many women, menopause is literally the first time they truly prioritize and focus on themselves. I mean, I like to think about energy a lot, and I was like this too. So I'll just talk about myself. When my children were small, when I was early in my career, I was casting my energy out, taking care of them, making sure I was meeting my employer's needs, making sure I was leading the people I was leading, so again, casting myself out onto all these other people. And then when you hit this midlife and you hit menopause, and particularly if there are some challenges there, it's often the first time you feel justified in putting all this attention on yourself because you need to get through it. So again, I think that's part of the magic as well, is that you bring your attention out from all these other people and other standards and you put them onto yourself. And then that's where real growth happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with all of that. And switching tacks a little bit, I'm wondering, so what does practical spirituality mean to you?
So what it means to me is that there is this all-loving, all-knowing divine energy, and it is a free universal resource that you can choose to leverage to have a better life than you're having right now or not. Okay. It's kind of like up to you what you do. But my tools and what I look for are ways that you can use the idea that you're spirit and you're part of this divine energy to better your life. And so I really take these different spiritual topics and I get down to what I say are the nitty gritty practical things. When someone says to me, go within, the answers are within. Okay. I do not like answers like that. I'm like, tell me specifically the steps that I would do. And so I really try to give all of my readers very detailed instructions on how they could try these things out in their own life and make them real and make them tangible for themselves.
And we're going to get to that for sure. And I'm interested in what your path was. Like, how did you initially make connection with spirit? How did you see that playing out in your life? And then how did you make this connection to how to support the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So my background is I grew up in a traditional religious environment and had a very positive experience with that, with my parents, my siblings. But yet at the same time, I continually felt like that traditional religion was not serving me specifically. I didn't feel like I was growing. And so I really just went out on my own and started reading and doing things. And I would say probably the boldest thing I did is I really just kind of started sitting with it and saying, you know what? I can figure this out on my own. I don't need someone to tell me what to believe. I can work through that and do that on my own. And I did. And, and I bumped around in this for a decade or more in terms of figuring out what I believed, what worked for me, taking from other people, and really then packaging that all together in ways that I say, hey, I tell all of my readers, my followers, you believe what you want to believe, but here are some tools that you can try. And I believe they will better your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the spirituality conversation is a big one, I think, at midlife, where we are reassessing how we want to feel in this world. Sometimes we're questioning what our experience has been, what we want it to be going forward. On my end, I also grew up in a fairly traditional religious Anglican, I think that is Episcopal in the US, and had, a really strong faith community. And then I spent the last 20 years disengaged from traditional church. There were lots of reasons for that. Part of it just being having a young family. Sunday morning was the only time that we really had to relax, not have to rush out of the house, and just be together. And over the last few months, I've been called back to church. And again, for lots of reasons. And part of it was with the rise of Christian nationalism on our planet. I wanted to go back and see, because none of what I know to be true about Christianity is reflected in that. And so I wanted to go back and see, had I rewritten my own history so much that I just didn't see that, or had I really truly experienced something different? And so going back to a church community, I realized, no, I hadn't rewritten my past history, actually. and that there's this beautiful space for reflection. And the thing that I noticed the most the first service we went back to was lessons and carols just before Christmas, and I wept through the entire thing. And part of it was the muscle memory of what it is to be in a space where I'm entirely focused on connection with spirit. Because I still I do not subscribe full stop without critical reflection to anything. So there is a big part of me that is still more esoteric spiritual. And church gives me a place to connect with community and an hour and a half in my week to stay present and focused in one space, which is something that we're missing in our world in general. Those two things, community and time where we are not distracted by 1,000 things. And so it's that has brought me back personally in that space. And I'm interested in your thoughts around how in this time in your life, if you're seeing some of your understanding of spirituality start to shift and change.
So I love all of that, Lisa, because it's just, I see like an arc of a story for
Mhm.
you. And I think it's an arc of a story that's very common. And what I would say is, those of us who talk about spirituality, this is not anti-religion. It's actually very inclusive. And I
Mhm.
see our universe as completely inclusive. Like it's a yes and.
Yes.
And to me, it's about finding the places that work for you at different times in your life. But I will just say, from my personal perspective, I needed to pull away from community so that I could find truly who I was and what I believed without those influences. And now I can come back to those communities and to those religions and to church and just embrace. And it's like I'm showing up as a whole authentic person versus a shell of a person that I was in my young adulthood. So I just think that there's a trajectory there and there's room for all of it. Thank goodness. I mean, thank goodness we have this absolutely fantastic, abundant universe that gives us, I mean, I can walk outside and feel like I'm in church, frankly, and look
Absolutely.
at the sky. So I would just say there are opportunities all week long. And that's some of the stuff that I teach, is that spirituality is not reserved for an hour on Sunday morning. Spirituality is all day, every day. And it's not reserved for a goal where you want to go start a charity. Spirituality can be about, you know what, I want a better fitness routine that works for me. I mean, so again, just very, very practical. It's part of every beat of your heart and all day long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I yesterday spent some time, I live very close to a river and it's spring, so it's been very high. And just standing and watching that river flow and watching the light reflect off the top was just as much a deep connection as had been my time in physical church that morning. And that connection to nature is so important. And I feel like this conversation is really important, that because people will ask me, like, how do you square spirituality with church? And I respond very similarly. I don't see them as being mutually exclusive. And because I am a fully formed human, I can take the aspects of each one that work for me in those moments and see it all under the umbrella of universal love. As long as that is the message that we are holding at the center of this beautiful force that loves us and that we love in return and creates these communities of love, that's where everything comes together.
So true. And I will tell you, I think nearly all of us who are in spirituality will agree that it's all about love and universal love. I think where people have a disagreement is what it means to love or how to love. And that's a very personal thing in my view. But in terms of spirituality, I mean, I feel spiritual when I'm cooking dinner, when I'm just, having some time and getting into the groove of doing that. I can feel spiritual when I'm in my car and I'm stuck in traffic. I can take a moment and feel that way. So in a lot of ways, I think that's what we need, is like we need to take more of the spirituality and infuse it into people's everyday lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are some of the techniques or strategies that you support the people that you are working with to do that?
Yeah. So, well, let me just kind of transition to talk about the book because the book
Mhm.
is literally chock full of strategies. I try to over include in this book of different ways to help you lose your critic. But let me just take a step back because I want to define for us what I'm talking about when I say the critic, because for a lot of us, it takes a different form. For many people, it takes the form of the very obvious criticizing yourself, looking at yourself and contemplating what's wrong. Sometimes even asking the question, what's wrong with me? I mean, there are people who do that and exist in their daily lives asking those questions. That's a critic who's doing that. But that's a very typical way, I would say. But there are other ways the critic shows up. So the critic also affects a lot of people by telling them to play small. It's a critic who coaxes you to only pursue goals you think you can achieve. And if you do start to dream big or think big, it almost like tamps you down. So that's another way that is a little bit sneaky, but the critic shows up. The third way I see the critic show up for a lot of people is by telling them to settle, meaning what you have is enough. Don't ask for more. That would be wrong. You should just be grateful for what you have. And again, to me, that's a critic mentality showing up in your life when you're settling. The fourth way the critic shows up is telling you to conform so that you belong. So the critic will tell you, you need to dress a certain way. You need to look a certain way. You need to adopt these thoughts or beliefs or ideas. That's a critical mindset. And the last way I see the critic showing up, and I see this for a lot of women midlife, it's a belief that everyone else comes first in your life instead of you. So that just is kind of set the stage because if somebody engages in any of those behaviors, this book is for you. And this book is about helping you break free from these habits of thought. And that's all the critic is a habit of thought that is not serving you so that you can then transition into habits of thought that do serve you and really tap in to that intuition, that inner wisdom. So that's kind of the platform, I would say, for the book. But you asked me specifically about some of the different things I teach. So the book is broken down by chapters and days. And so I suggest that the reader read the chapter, and then there is a specific exercise with every single day to help you transition out of these, what I call critic thought patterns. So I'll just pick one day and one tool that I do. So a lot of people I know run their life with a to-do list. They sit down at the beginning of the day and they make a little list and say, here's all the things I have to do today. And they make that list. And that list runs their day, tells them what to do. And for many people, that list becomes the measure of their success for the day. They get to the end of the day and they feel good about themselves if they've checked off things and not good if they haven't. I mean, they literally give their power to a little teeny tiny list that they make. And so what I teach is, first, let's all get real. That list that you created is a list of things you do not want to do. Because if you wanted to do them, you wouldn't forget. You would just go do them and take it. So it's a list of things for whatever reason, and it could be fears or blocks, but for whatever reason, you don't want to do that. So I coach people and teach people to begin using what I call is a logbook. So instead of making these to-do lists that guide your day, instead, just get any old notebook or a piece of paper, anything you want, put the date down and log what you did and how you felt when you did it. And you log accomplishments. And I log even the smallest accomplishment. If I reach out to somebody about my book or about marketing, I log that. I did that and here's how I felt. So I use my logbook and I say I capture three things. I capture the good, the wonderful, and the done. And that's what I do all day long. I work according to my energy, my wants, and what makes sense to me. And then I log what I've done. And then I celebrate at the end of the day all that I've accomplished. And frankly, my productivity, once I started logging many, many years ago, my productivity soared once I started working this way. So that's just one thing that I detail in there. And as I said, there's 28 separate exercises, but that's just one that I teach.
I really like the element of writing down how you feel and celebrating yourself for what you're able to do. I will push back on one thing, and that is my menopausal brain requires me to write things down now, which I didn't before. I never used to have to make a list of things. And now most of the things I do in my life are because I want to do, right? They're creative and they're exciting. And I often need to write them down at the beginning of the day because my menopausal brain just doesn't hold them the way they used to.
Yes, and it, Lisa, I totally hear you. I have a list just like that. It's actually sitting here on my desk. I call that list though my could do list. Okay, so it's not in charge of me. It's my could do list. Number
Yes.
one, and then number two. Whenever I add something to that list, I really try to get intentional about what I want. So if something on that list is schedule my dental appointment, I get really clear and say, you know what, I want healthy teeth. So it's not just this thing hanging over my head. It's tied to something I want, which again, I think is very self-affirming. I think most of us, when we have lists that we're procrastinating and not doing, I think it's because we're freedom loving people and we are resisting this idea of being forced to do something. And then once you kind of take your power back from that, like this list is not the boss of me. This
Yeah.
list is an adjunct and is helping me to see what I want to do today.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the positioning. I like the positioning of that because we are freedom loving people and we are taught from the very beginning to sacrifice our freedom in service of productivity.
We're not only taught that, it's worshiped, I would say,
Yeah.
Lisa. I mean, we look at people who have accomplished a hard goal, made themselves miserable, and accomplished it through strict discipline. We hold up on a pedestal. And, frankly, my belief is that is very self-negating behaviors. I mean, I do hard things all the time, but they're anchored towards what I want to achieve. And I follow my energy when I do that. I would never, for instance, like say next Tuesday at 10 a.m., I'm going to write and force myself to write. That's not how I work. I follow my energy and I find that I have higher productivity doing that than enforcing myself through things.
Yes. And I think it's the force, right? It creates this resistance within us. When we are trying to force something, there is an energy probably coming from a past experience that is coming up, and it just makes that internal resistance, which is like the energetic form of the critic, right? Like if we're feeling it, if we're feeling that critic in our body, it often feels like some form of resistance. And it is that internal resistance that actually makes everything harder. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that when you released that part, you're releasing that resistance. So you're not having your energy come up against that resistance, which becomes the larger energy spend.
Yeah. So, as I said, I mean, I see the critic as simply a habit of thought. It's a thought pattern. It's something we've gone to over and over again, almost like creating a hardened belief in us. And once you start breaking down some of those beliefs, what I have experienced is that your authentic spirit, which is really strong and really powerful, sort of comes forward in your life and begins to make that process accelerate and go much faster and much easier.
So, what are the humans that you are working with? What is their experience when they start implementing the strategies that you have in your book or that you share with them?
I think for a lot of the folks, I would say it's mostly midlifers, those kind of people. A lot of them are for the first time confronting the critic. And I'd say that's one of the biggest reasons I see for people having the critic. They actually think it's them. They think, well, this is just how I am. I'm a negative person. I'm a critical person. And so the book really opens their eyes to that. And it's so often in life, you just have to open your mind to that possibility and things start to shift. So I would say for a lot of people, it's that. The second thing I see is that folks who have done the exercises in the book start to add things to their life that are joy inducing to them. And it's almost as if the critic kept them hostage and kind of in a box. And once they started busting out, they started doing things that they enjoyed. I mean, I have one woman who just went deep into photography, another woman who immediately went and signed up to become a death doula, something that she always wanted to do, but felt, because she was in a corporate career, felt that that was not something she could do. So again, what I'm seeing is people kind of starting to bust out of the shell. And that's how I see the critic, is like binding you up and holding you tight. And you start busting out, and the energy that is you, the spirit that is you, just starts living in a new way, adding in more activities that are joyful.
Absolutely. And so much of what you're saying is so connected to, our generation and what was held up as successful and the image of what we were supposed to be. And suddenly we are finding ourselves in this space of like, well, that was maybe not the best advice.
Well said.
Yeah. So we're in this place of, there are beautiful things about seeing women, being successful in that very specific definition and leading and changing things. And it also set up an impossible standard of you will be a perfect partner to someone, you will be a perfect parent to someone, something, however that shows up in your life or doesn't. You will be a perfect employee, you will be a perfect advocate, you will have a perfect home, you will have a perfect body. Like literally the standard became, okay, you want to see change and you want to be more involved, cool, but you're going to have to be perfect at everything all the time. And so now we have this midlife revolution that is happening because we are starting to realize what the lie was, and that we cannot be perfect at all things. We were never meant to be. We were meant to have this joyous experience on this planet, and all of those expectations of perfection have kept us in those boxes.
Yes, so, so true and so well said. I would say, particularly as you step into spirituality and recognize yourself as an eternal being, and you really just let your mind sit with that, you'll begin to realize that there's always a standard above where you are. There's always more to become. There's always growth. I mean, you are eternal. And I'm assuming we are eternally becoming more and more. There's always more. So I do think that the existence of eternity out in front of us creates this idea of perfectionism, but I think it also helps you relax into the present moment and say, look, no matter where I am on the continuum of eternity, there's always something out ahead of me. So let's quit striving for that and let's be present here. And your comments about what our generation was taught, I think the big thing, and I still see this, but the big thing I feel like that was modeled for me was that goals, the destination, is more important than the journey. Okay. So in fact, if you have a goal and you reach that goal and you got there through terrible hard work and you overcame misery, and again, the harder it was for you to get there, the more we lauded that.
Yes.
And that's, to me, the thought pattern that is disintegrating, and that we are all stepping back and saying, hold on, the journey is just as important as the destination. Number one, I think a lot of us are awakening to that. And number two, when you take action doing something you love and you enjoy, and this is something I teach and talk about a lot, but that action and activity is supercharged. I mean, when I sit and am doing something I love to do, I can work for 2 and 3 hours without taking a break and without even looking up. That is how, and that's, to me, that's how we're meant to be motivated, not, forcing ourselves into a chair and contorting ourselves to do something. So I think that's the big shift I'm feeling, that our generation is waking up and saying, like, hold on a minute. This whole forced productivity is not the way to go.
Absolutely. And that voice of the critic is so deeply embedded. How do you help people hear it before it influences their action?
To me, that's just practiced awareness. And that's something. So a lot of what I teach is really helping people see, first of all, you've got to see your thoughts. So you've got to do that practice awareness. You need to see your thought, but then you need to make decisions about it. It's mentioned earlier that you don't take in anything without some earnest reflection and, discernment on that. And a lot of people haven't done that yet. I mean, they've just sort of absorbed things by osmosis. So a big part of what I teach is to just sit with ideas and say, is that idea true? Is it helpful to me? Is it frankly an idea I would want to pass on to my children or to anyone I love? And if it's not, then make a decision. And I believe in intentions and the power of intentions. Make
Yeah.
a decision to let that go and choose an idea that's better suited for you. And that is something that I teach in the book as well.
Yeah. And I think that is such an essential strategy for us because our nervous systems are keyed for this like immediate action, especially because we are living on a planet that has our nervous systems in overdrive all the time. And so it's a really great way to take a moment, take a beat, sit with, and really think about what am I feeling in this moment? What do I really want in this moment? And let that be the place that we make decisions from rather than from the like belief that we need to fly into action immediately.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'll also say sometimes you need to fly into action and feel the effect of that. I mean, just to use a simple example, perhaps I snap at my husband, okay? But the act of snapping at my husband is a big flashing yellow light for me to say, hold on. Clearly, I've got something stirring in the background here. Let me go take a moment and figure out what's really going on here and why I just snapped at you. So sometimes I agree with you in terms of I try to be discerning, but we're also humans interacting with other humans,
Yes.
and take the action and then pull yourself back and give the apology.
Yes, yeah, and it is the reflection afterwards, right? Because often we just are going from one situation to the next. And I think the heart of it is giving ourselves a little bit of time and a little bit of grace to either reflect before or after, and then learn from that in terms of how we're going to interact with somebody in the future or the decision that I'm going to make that's going to be in service of what I need now in this time. So, you shared some really great and helpful strategies that will be definitely impactful for listeners. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. And in the show notes, you'll be able to find how to purchase Sue's book and how to connect with her. So if this resonates with you, make sure you take the time to check that out. And Sue, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks, Lisa.
Hey everyone. Thanks for joining me on this week's episode of Transforming 45. I hope you feel inspired, empowered, and ready to embrace every facet of your midlife journey. If you enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. These actions make a world of difference in growing our podcast community. Your support helps us reach much more amazing listeners just like you. And don't forget, please share an episode you love with a friend or with your community. Sharing our stories is what helps our community grow. Keep shining your midlife magic, and I'll catch you next week.
Electricast.